Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Greg with Engaging History. Today we're going to look at a Marco Polo and the Silk Road map activity. Before we get started, let's look at the quote of the week. Kindness is a language that the deaf can hear and the blind can see, from Mark Twain. Remember, we study history to understand our world, avoid past mistakes, and appreciate other cultures. And as always, the lesson I'm going to show you today aims to be both fun and challenging for your students. Okay, Marco Polo, fascinating story. He's often remembered as the first European to travel to Asia. That's not entirely true. There was quite a few people that traveled to Asia before he did, including his father and his uncle, who took Marco Polo on their second trip with them. But he is remembered as the first because he was the first to really document his travels and wrote a book about it. In fact, he wrote a book while he was in prison when he got back after 24 years on the road back in Venice. And that's why we know so much about his trip, and it inspired many later travelers and voyagers like Christopher Columbus. The activity that I have today, it starts with a blank map, as you can see in the background here, and by the end students can turn that into a map with tons of information that has trade routes, Marco Polo's trip to Asia and his trip back, and some major cities and other geographic features we will identify on the map. So I'm going to show you a few of the steps here to turn this blank map into a map full of information. Okay, so step one, students are going to decide which color represents land routes, sea routes, cities, and then they're going to create a key. So I like to use some kind of blue or green for sea routes and maybe red or orange for land routes, but really I let the students decide what they want to use there. And then some kind of star to represent cities that we're going to pass along the Silk Road. Step two, Venice. So we're going to identify Venice. It's right over here on the left near the top, what is now northern Italy. That's where Marco Polo is from. So we'll identify Venice first. And then it doesn't have to look perfect, but I have my students draw a little sketch of a young Marco Polo over there near Venice so we can remember that that's where he starts his voyage. Step 5, we're going to identify the city of Karakorum. This was the Mongol Empire capital when Genghis Khan first established the Mongol Empire. And that's not the capital anymore when Marco Polo goes on his voyage. We'll see why in just a moment. Step 6, the Mongols took over China to establish the Yuan dynasty, or the Yuan Empire. Use a different color, lightly shade the boundaries of this dynasty. I give my students a minute to do that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the general area here, it encompasses most of modern day China. They're going to label that the Yuan dynasty. Step 7, Kublai Khan moved the Mongol Empire capital from Karakorum to what is now Beijing. Zhongdu is what it was called. Students are going to put a star and label that city in the Yuan dynasty. And then somewhere in this area, I'm going to have my students draw a quick sketch of Kublai Khan to remember that this is his empire. Okay, by the end, I'm not going to show all the steps, but you can see in the little thumbnail here that by the end, we're going to have all sorts of land and sea routes into Asia and Marco Polo's journeys as well. Now, instead of just having my students copy step by step as I bring it up on the screen, which I think has a lot of value, I love to have opportunities for students to think critically, whether you use Bloom's taxonomy to think about this sort of framework, or Costa's levels of questions, or Webb's depth of knowledge. The idea is that we want students to think critically, to practice critical thinking, not just copy what we're doing, not just listen to teachers talk. So by the end of this activity, I have a number of questions that students are supposed to process and answer on the back, as well as fill out the map. Hopefully this helped inspire you, get you thinking about how to do a lesson on Marco Polo or the Silk Road. Thank you for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe. I'm going to have a few links underneath on the bottom here to this lesson and some other freebies and resources that you can use. Thanks again.